Welcome everyone to the Folklore Lunch series hosted by the Kule Folklore Center at the University of Alberta. My name is Marina Czerniawska. I'm the archivist at the Kule Folklore Center. Together with my colleagues, we will be presenting today our favorite stories from the Local Culture Project. You can see the outline of today's presentation on the screen. I will start and present on the latest phase of the project that took place in 2019-2021. The initial working title of my presentation was Finding a Needle in a Haystack, but then I changed it to the one that you see on the screen. Matthias Kalterbrunner, who was a postdoctoral fellow at the time of the project at the Kule Folklore Center, will talk about Mennonite World War II experiences. Elena Pogosyan, director of the Kule Folklore Center, will talk about the new exhibit based on the Local Culture Project interviews. And finally, Maria Majerchik, who was a visiting researcher at the Kule Folklore Center at the time, will present another creative way the project data was used and talk about the children's book, Anna's Dream. Each presentation will take about 10 minutes, and then we will have some time for questions. Please use the questions and answers button at the bottom of your screen to ask panelists questions. And you can also use the chat button to send messages either to panelists only or to all attendees. All right. So the Local Culture and Diversity on the Prairies project was conducted by the Kule Folklore Center and its partners in 2003-2005 with a goal to document everyday lives of French, German, English, and Ukrainian Canadians who remembered life on the prairies prior to 1939. It took 3 years of intense fieldwork research and resulted in approximately 800 hours of audio interviews, a rich data corpus that can be mined for a multitude of themes. Interviewees came from diverse ethnic backgrounds. In addition to the four mentioned above, you can see on the slide a list of all the ethnicities as identified by interviewees. However, this presentation is not about this project, but it is rather about its outcome, a large collection of audio interviews. If anyone would like to learn more about the initial project, there is a documentary about it on our YouTube channel. There is a project website where you can learn about the methodology, the project design, about participants and interviewees. There was a project report published, which is available at the Kule Folklore Center Library. And you have an opportunity to learn more about the project next week when its principal investigator, Dr. Andriy Nachevsky, will be talking about it at the symposium of the Kule Institute of Advanced Study. And the link is right here. And it will be pasted, it has been pasted in the chat for your convenience as well. So here we are with this huge collection of audio interviews with high research value, covering a large number of topics. We noticed over the years that when we get reference questions at the archives, we often refer a person to Local Culture Project materials. In spite of the frequent use, accessing the materials wasn't easy. Finding information, for example, on weddings or building structures within 800 hours of audio is very challenging. So we decided to dedicate 1 year to processing this collection in order to make it available online and make it more easily discoverable. Our objective was to, let me minimize this window so you can see the beautiful pictures. Our objective was to process as many interviews as possible. We were going to standardize existing metadata created by field workers and researchers in the 2000s, create metadata that was missing. Initially, there was a desire to transcribe all the interviews to allow full text search, but we soon realized that 1 year is not nearly enough for such an ambitious goal. So we decided to create indexes instead, by noting the content of segments as well as time in for each of them. In the end, we wanted the interviews to be publicly accessible and discoverable online. And we wanted to create an exhibit based on the Local Culture Project materials. Here's the Local Culture Project team at one of our weekly meetings in October 2019. Later, it grew to include 2 more researchers and a class of 6 graduate students in MLCS 599 who were working on the exhibit creation. Before the project even started in September 2019, we were looking for a digital solution. We wanted to find an online content management system that supports metadata standards and can stream audio. Ideally, it would support other types of digital objects, such as video, images, and text, as those are, to a smaller extent, also part of the local culture project collection. We wanted the system to have sophisticated search functionality and to be user-friendly. We wanted to be able to easily export our data and metadata out of the system in the future, and we were concerned about long-term preservation of these materials, and we are still working on that. We decided on a two-part solution, each part of which met a number of our requirements. First of all, we met with the wonderful people at the digital initiatives at the Alberta Libraries, and after a discussion, concluded that the university's media streaming repository, RAV, would be a fitting home for such a collection. We continued working with Mariana Paredes Olea and Sean Luke, to whom we are extremely grateful for all their help to map the existing metadata to be ingested into RAV along with digital objects. On our end, archival assistant Eric Fincham was instrumental in making this happen. Currently, Local Culture Project is the largest collection in RAV with over 300 items, and it's only part of the entire collection. And it's not the end. We are still preparing more items to be added to the collection in the near future. In addition to RAV, we kept looking for a way to index the interviews to allow their content to be searchable. We chose a system created by the Nunn Center for Oral History at the University of Kentucky Libraries called OMS, pronounced OMS, which stands for Oral History Metadata Synchronizer. OMS provides users world-level search capability and a time-correlated indexed interview connecting the textual search with the search term to the corresponding moment in the audio. There are two main components of the OMS system. OMS application, it's where the work is done. It's a backend web-based application where files are uploaded, metadata is created, and interviews are indexed. Upon completion, metadata and the time-coded index or synchronized transcript are exported as an XML file and placed on a web server. The OMS XML files interfaces with the content management system through the OMS viewer, which is the second part of this suite. When an interview is called by the repository, the OMS viewer loads and displays metadata from the corresponding XML file. So this is the backend of the OMS. These are interviews that are in progress. You can see there is some color coding that helps identify the status of an interview within the workflow. So the green means it's completed and can be exported as an XML. There's also CSV option. Metadata is where the item is created and where metadata is created. In clicking on index, hyperlink takes the user to the player. You can hear it. The interview starts playing right away. The user can tag a specific place within the interview and create these different segments. So these are the title of the segments. There is a brief description. There are subject terms and keywords. There is GPS location for the interview location or locality that is the subject of the interview. And sometimes there are also links to external sources that are relevant to this specific interview. So in the very end, when this is completed, the end user sees this in the OMS viewer. So you see on the very top of the screen, you see the basic metadata about this project. We see the name of the interviewee and the interviewer, the date is often part of that. We can play the entire interview or we can browse through the descriptions. And if we are interested in a particular segment, we can click play segment and the audio jumps to that time code within the interview. We can also search within this index. For example, if we search for farms, we can see that there are 4 different results, 4 different segments that contain this word. And if you click on each of these hits, you can see where exactly this word is mentioned within the interview, and you can play that corresponding segment. As nice as it is to have the ability to search within interview indexes, with some 800 people interviewed, some of them several times using different methods, we needed a tool that would search across all interviews, not only within each index. Luckily, there is a plugin suite that allows to integrate OMS with Omeka. Those who haven't heard of it, Omeka is an open source web publishing platform for digital collections. OMS import allows you to import OMS XML files and will automatically map fields in the XML files to corresponding fields in Omeka, creating new items as the oral history item type. Full integration of OMS and Omeka requires that the OMS XML files are also placed on the server with the associated OMS viewer. OMS object utilizes the embedded OMS viewer to display the oral history item. It makes contents of the OMS transcript or index searchable by Omeka's global search. So this is the website. It's located at localcultures.ukrfolk.ca. Users can browse items and can browse collections. Collections are centered around people and around individuals. So if we look at Mary Picklick collection, we can see that there are 2 items within this collection, and both of them are audio files. One can click on the item, and here you will see already familiar OMS viewer with the ability to play, to read through the short summaries, and also to search within the index. There is also a description tab where you can find the metadata. However, the advantage of using OMS is that you can use this global search on the top of the screen to search for across all the interviews that are within this database. If you know, for example, a name of a person that you're looking for, you can type it, for example, Elias, and you can see that there are 10 items related to this person, and both collection and item level items are listed. You can click on the collection and see the numerous interviews and also photographs for this person. There are many other options, ways to search, including using Boolean operators and not or. There is exact match, there's also advanced search, and all of these are noted in the search tips. And we're also working to create short videos that will help users familiarize themselves with this new website. Thank you very much for your attention. I will stop sharing and we'll turn it over to Matthias.
Okay, great. So thank you so much. My presentation is titled Conscientious Objectors, Narrating the Mennonite World War II Experience. I think I have to explain a little bit at the beginning my idea. I mean, it's really hard, I think, to figure out what is my favorite story, because I came across so many stories when I processed the interviews. And so I just thought that maybe it would be better to present you at the beginning a favorite picture. So that's one of my favorite pictures. It depicts Ernie Enns at the CO camp, a conscientious objectors camp in 1941. And I like it especially because it's full of contrasts, right? You see a man in a barrack-like room playing a violin. And at the same time, it's actually a double portrait, because there's a picture of his then fiancée in the background, and there's also the engagement picture on the wall of this barrack. And what I'm going to tell you now is from an interview that was conducted with both Irene and Ernie Enns together in April 2005 in Winnipeg, Manitoba. Many of the Mennonites interviewed in the Local Cultures Project were interviewed by Christine Campman and Angela Thiessen. And this is especially important because both came from Mennonite families. They were very familiar with the Mennonite community and with Mennonite history, and they were in particular interested into their World War II experience. I'll give you just some very basic background information. So Ernie Enns was one of about 11,000 conscientious objectors in Canada. So they chose to follow their persuasion and not to fight in the war. I think most of you are familiar with Mennonite history. Pacifism was at the core of their faith, and actually their refusal to serve in any kind of armed forces had made the Mennonites migrate from what is now the Dutch-German borderland to Prussia, and later to the Russian Empire. Many of them lived in southeastern Ukraine. And when conscription was introduced in the Russian Empire in the 1870s, the first Mennonites came to Canada. Irene and Ernie Enns came in the 1920s as small children. That was the second wave of Mennonite immigration into Canada. So they were among the last people who came out, who made it out from the Soviet Union. I will give you just a short overview about the experience of a conscientious objector. The experience of a conscientious objector started with a court hearing. That is particularly important. In many interviews, it was Judge George Adamson who was mentioned. It was Ernie Enns recalled that he was an unpredictable man. Some people fared poorly, but Ernie Enns was treated fairly. Judge Adamson asked penetrating questions, so it was not automatically that they would be granted the CEO status. Some who weren't granted the status were eventually jailed as draft dodgers, but Ernie Enns made it through this hearing. And what did he do? He worked in Kananaskis, Alberta, in this weather station. This is exactly where this photograph was taken. He himself called this a little berry corner where I was for 2 years, my home sweet home. Later on, he would perform different tasks. For instance, he would work for some time in a psychiatric ward in Winnipeg, and later he would go to Ottawa, where he would work as a censor of mail of German prisoners of war. What was the biggest problem for Ernie Enns was that he earned so little. So for 4.5 years, he would earn a mere 50 cents a day. Yeah, so what he had to do, he would live on his VOC's salary. And that's how Irene's story comes in. Irene worked at Eaton's in Winnipeg. And Ernie Enns even joked, I married you for the money, big pay at Eaton's. But the problem was that as soon as she got married, she was fired from Eaton's. That is a story that I counted several times in the interviews. Married men wouldn't be hired full-time. So she had to look for another job. And she eventually applied at the British intelligence in Ottawa, and she became a random tester for mail. So actually what she did, she had to steam the envelopes open, and they had chemicals. They painted over, and she was looking for hidden ink. That was what she did. And asked why she actually wanted to work for the British intelligence, she just said she had to find a job to support her husband. We had to pay the rent, we had to eat, we couldn't cook in our room. I found this especially interesting because actually through the war, with a husband who was a conscientious objector, it was her who became the main breadwinner in the family, and actually the traditional roles of men and women were reversed. But she couldn't really cherish this kind of empowerment very much, because as she admitted, she felt uneasy. I really felt, so quote, I really felt guilty that Ernie was in the CO camp, you know, I really did. She figured that it is not right. He's in no danger. Ask if the other girls contributed to that feeling. Irene Ann says one or two. So I found this segment particularly interesting because she said it when her husband was sitting next to her, and she admitted that she actually wanted to be like the other girls who had husbands in the military. And now it comes, I mean, what were the reactions of the English-speaking majority? Bernie Enns was very careful. He said that he was grateful for Canada for that opportunity. He said in Europe he would have been probably shot at the spot. But there were some incidents. For example, in Calgary, a girl spat in his face. Ernie says it was not because he was German, but because he was not in the military. Quote, the war does, you know, sad things to people, emotional things, I understand. There was another incident where he was confronted with a young woman whose brother was killed in the war. And again, so he was kind of, he says, she was not very friendly when we came, so that is he and other Mennonites. But again, he says you have to understand that. In the interviews, I would say an equivocal and ambiguous picture is painted of the Mennonites' attitudes towards Nazi Germany. I mean, Ernie Enns admits that he had a brother-in-law who was interned as a foreign citizen because he was a member of a German club that had some pro-Nazi tendencies. And only later, he said, he became aware of the atrocities of the Holocaust. And in the 1930s, he says the attitude was, Nazi, that's wonderful. That's his quote. So it was a twofold experience. On the one hand, they were somehow discriminated against the Germans, but the main clash with the English and French majority was that they weren't in the military, and they had some unpleasant experiences, as he put it. What is also very interesting in this interview are his reflections. Okay, I have to come to an end. Are his reflections on pacifism. As I said, it's at the core of the Mennonite faith, but nevertheless, some would actually serve in the military, and some were excommunicated from the Mennonite community for serving in the military. So what comes very clear in the interviews is that they were somehow in between their own community and between the English-French majority. I think it's that the interviews, it's a subject that is not really present, I think, the experience of the conscientious objectors. And I learned a lot about the Mennonite history in World War II, and I think it's worthwhile to elaborate a little more on this. And actually, what I'm trying now, I'm working on an article exactly on the way how the Mennonites narrated their experience in the local culture interviews. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Matthias. And now Elena Pagasian is next.
Hello, and I will be speaking about an exhibit which we created to accompany our local cultures project. And this exhibit had basically two main purposes. The first purpose, of course, we wanted to promote our project and to let different communities know about it, about accessibility, and what is a better way as to present it as a snapshot of a project. We decided to focus on childhoods because most of our interviewees were growing up in the late 20s and the 30s. So everybody was speaking about their childhoods. But also those stories of childhoods were the most vivid and for me most interesting. So we called our exhibit Chasing Gophers Barefoot, Prairie Children of the 1930s. And I will speak a little bit about the exhibit. We'll try to leave time for Maria because her project is remarkable. I really want everyone to see the children's book as well. So when we started to work on the exhibit, and you can see on this little flyer, one of the earlier versions of the title, Remembering Children. But when we started, it was, we worked with approximately 100 interviews. This is how many interviews were processed at this point. And what we discovered that we are mostly working with the interviews which were recorded from the immigrant families. So most of the children were born to families that recently immigrated or they came from Europe with their families as very small children. And before getting into the exhibit, I would like to mention that the exhibit was curated by a group of graduate students and faculty members, and these are the names of our curators. It's a large group, but also it's a large undertaking because you need to go through a lot of materials. And our exhibit designer, Lindsay Sarell, joined the group. We started in January 2019. She joined us in approximately March. And and this is how this exhibit was created. But before even getting into the exhibit, I would like to share my favorite story. So this is how our exhibit looks. It's working kind of a way to display it because it's not printed yet, but we wanted it to look like a puzzle to somehow represent children culture. But I would like to start with my favorite story. I heard about dirty 30s before we started this project, but I always thought it's a part of the Depression, the Great Depression, really bad period in Canadian history and prairie history. But of course, I never knew what it was for real. And I learned about the dust storms and hailstorms and plagues of grasshoppers. I learned that a lot of families had to move, and it meant that leaving an established farm behind and going somewhere new and just settling as you are a pioneer settler again. So all this I learned while reading reading synopsis or listening to the interviews. But when it's really started to be kind of part of my mentality is when I was reading stories about how you in the morning can't really open your door because it's blocked by piles of sand, how every crack in the house would let the sand in, and you will have sand everywhere, on windowsills, on furniture, in your food, in your mouth, constantly feeling it. But the story which really got me was a story told by Matilda Cecilia Jensen, and from Saskatchewan. And she was saying that, yeah, this and that was happening. And then I will just read one sentence from this interview. Us kids, that's another chore we had. We had a stick to keep the clothes moving so that the grasshoppers wouldn't land on them and wouldn't eat holes on them. And then you see those kids, you know, moving laundry outside of a house, and you know that even your clothes can be eaten by grasshoppers. That's really got me. But now shortly about the exhibit. So we went through all the interviews available and decided on this list of the topics. And those topics, of course, do not cover everything that was interesting, surprising, educational in the interviews, but we tried to at least follow some basic research procedures, and we tried to generalize on what we hear. So the story which would appear again and again would be included in our list. Or if somebody would insist that this is how it was, we all mothers, all fathers did this and that, so we would more or less include these stories in our exhibit initial script or plan. And of course, when you prepare an exhibit, you need to do at least two basic things. You generalize, choose narratives that repeat or will represent particular generation or geographical area, and then you need to visualize it. I won't really stay with generalizing. I need to just mention that after you have your story, the next step is to tell the story. And how can when you are telling the story, you use material which is given to you from the first person perspective, and then there is a painful procedure or name this person. Of course, we can call them children and kids, but normally you need to explain what kind of children, and then immigrants' children, settlers' children, and so on. So this and this is where your kind of point of view, your ideology, kind of slowly enters your exhibit. And from this ideal situation, when you want to show how it was presented in the interviews, you slowly move into kind of imposing your own views. So we tried our best not to do it, but of course everybody is human, and you will see when exhibit is available how we dealt with that. And for visualizing, we also had a number of obstacles. And of course, it was not possible to simply illustrate our stories. Why? First of all, photography, especially before and during the 1930s, it was children photography. It was still very much a staged photography. There was a number of narratives which were kind of expected to be presented. Already in the late Victorian era, the idea of cuteness was invented. So, and this idea really was important. So it would be something what you see here, and this is already not too staged. It's reasonably representative of the kind of real life, because you have books and games, you have real fish here, but mostly it was, you know, good kids doing nice chores, reading books, being pretty, or vice versa, being funny. So most of the photographs from different archives didn't really work for us. What was well represented is school life. What was well represented? So school life. Probably because there was institutional tradition of taking pictures. And, you know, fortunately for us, in addition to simply, you know, class pictures, there were also photographs of different activities or just fooling around. Some photographs were not direct illustrations, but you can see that even you know, this not professional photograph can tell you a lot, can tell its own story. And these photographs we included because you don't even need to invent a story here or to connect this to some existing narratives, because you can see that this jacket is too large for the boy, obviously was handed down. These pants are too short and also already been well loved, and so on. So we had a lot of really nice photographs storytelling. In this particular case, and it's difficult to catch it right away, but, and when you know a little bit of background, it starts speaking. We see two girls here. Both of them are wearing quite expensive dresses from Eaton's catalog, and we found very similar dresses in the catalog. So dresses are bought, but look, they have holes on their stockings, and obviously those dresses are not new at all. And guess what? We learned from the interview that these are two orphans adopted by a peasant family. Probably they were living with mother and father in a city, wearing bought dresses, and ended up in a quite poor family. And actually, this is where I will stop my presentation. I hope I gave you a little kind of a picture snapshot of our exhibit, and I hope when it will be available, everybody will join us, and we are planning a big opening for this exhibit. So that's it. To you, Maria.
Thank you very much, Elena. So, my favorite story. My favorite story is also was intended, it's a project, and it was intended again as complementary, as accompanying of the exhibit. Exhibit was meant to accompany the local culture project, and then when we decided that the exhibit will be about childhood in the cities, gradually it became clear that it would be good to have a story not only about children, but also for children of our days. And we played with several ideas. We were thinking about a quest, or about to create part of the exhibit for children, or to create exhibit in form of a game. But finally we decided that a book would be the best decision. And although it was intended as part of the exhibition, the book can exist separately, independently, autonomously, and it is, although at the same time it is connected to the story. You can see, to the exhibit, you can see that Anna, the book, the title is Anna's Dream. It was written by Lesia Savechuk and me, and illustrated by Lindsay Sorrell. And you can see that our Anna visually resembles a girl from the main picture of the exhibit. So we tried to establish this connection between these two projects. This is the first picture of the book. I am not going to tell you the whole story. Obviously, we want you to read the book, the story. But this picture can convey the general mood of the story. It is a farm. Anna is a 7 or 8 year old girl. She is Ukrainian, the family is Ukrainian. She lives on the farm, and this is their homestead. This is, the time is just few days before Ukrainian Christmas. And you can see that Anna's mom opened the door to shake a rug. And you can also see a bird in the center of the picture, in the foreground. And this is when the bird flew into their house. And this is an accident where the story begins. Because according to Ukrainian beliefs, when a bird knocked the window or flew into the house, it means something. It is a sign. In Ukrainian traditional culture, birds have connection to the other world, to the world of death, and therefore a bird can bring news about somebody's death, or that somebody is going to be born, or that a letter can arrive to the family. But Anna has her own idea what it can mean, because according to Anna's understanding of symbols, the bird is telling that something very good is going to happen very soon. So the whole story is playing with this idea about surprise, about Ukrainian Christmas, etc. You can see how many cute details are added to the picture. We can see a well in the center of the picture, a sleigh. You can see a rope between the house and the barn. It helped to go from house to the barn during snowstorm. There are also some animals in a book hidden behind the trees, and even Lindsay drew, how we could call it, restroom or washroom behind the
outhouse.
Behind the house. So we try to enrich pictures with many details which are accurate according to the realities of the cities. When we follow Anna through her daily routines, at home, at school, we learn a lot about life on the farm in the city. So on the one hand, we have a story that keeps us attracted, but on the other hand, we learn a lot about realities of that time, and actually realities of children's life, their chores, their schools. This is the picture where Anna is milking a cow, and it happens before she goes to school. And this is Anna and her brother. They arrived to school, and etc., etc. So whole book is conveys the not only the story but also facts from the life of that time. We don't deny that this is a fiction, this is made up story, but at the same time, all details, all facts of the book were gathered from interviews. So all these events happened to someone during the late 20s and 30s. We combined them in the different form and created this story. But facts itself, accidents and surprises sometimes happened to someone in the past. In this sense, we wanted this story to be very historically accurate. Not only two of three of us were working on the book. We appreciate help of the entire team of people, especially to Elena Pogosyan, Marina Chernyavsky, Andrei Nahachevsky, who helped us to make Anna's dream come true. We had to check a lot of elements of everyday life in the cities. For example, so this fact is not included in the story, but in order to build the story, we needed to now, and the entire story is happening in Smoky Lake area. Actually, it is Strain, very close to Vilna. So we needed to know how would father travel from Vilna to Smoky Lake, from Stray to Smoky Lake. For that reason, Marina helped us to find train schedule in Smoky Lake during 30s. So we were checking facts of facts that of many details that details that happened in the cities. Our Lindsay, who illustrated the book, were looking in catalogs for patterns and fabric that would be popular in that time. So she can draw clothing that is accurate in respect to that time. So many details were verified while we were working on the book. We also went to local museums to see how would this is not completed. This is work in progress. This is picture of Sveta Večerya, Holy Supper. So we needed to know how would plates look like at that time, whether they would be mismatched or be identical. I traveled to Smoky Lake to see the place where events took place. So this is our story about Anna, about a small Ukrainian girl in the cities that lived in Smoky Lake area, and we invite everyone to read the story when it will be out. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Maria. It's such an amazing book. I can't wait to hold it in my hands. I think it's a beautiful, beautiful story and beautifully presented. We have several questions from the audience, but I see Elena has her hand raised. Would you like Elena to say anything?
Yes, because as usual, I will have to leave in a few minutes because we're still teaching. I just want to say a few words. So first of all, yes, book is beautiful, and I am being 58 years old, totally identified with Anna, and was so touched. And I know that it's not only my reaction. I cried when I first read the book. I cried when I was reading it with illustration. Great job, Maria, unbelievable. But I will answer just one question before leaving, and it's about our exhibit online. We decided not to put it online yet. We want, because we all want to have a little bit of real normal life and face-to-face interactions, we will first open it as a physical object in real space, speaking to real people. And the next step would be hopefully to sending it to different locations in Canada, but also putting it online. And it will be a simple procedure. We have everything kind of in blocks. It will be just moving blocks to website. So yes, but not right away. We want to enjoy the opening first. All right, so thank you very much. I am leaving. I hope this discussion will be productive.
Thank you, Elena. We have many comments praising the project, and Maria, good job, especially to you. It is a beautiful concept and a great project, and people are looking forward the same way as I am to buying your book and having a copy. All right, let's move on to the questions. We have one question from Natalia Hanenko-Friesen. My question concerns the availability, Googleability of this project to people unfamiliar with Kule Folklore Center and its work. A person may want to look for oral history of Canadian prairies, or oral history Icelandic, or local history on the Canadian prairies, and still may not find this project on Google or via other search engines. What can be done to make it more visible and accessible? There are several ways that we will be approaching this, and of course it's a very important point. Thank you for asking, Natalia. Well, first of all, there's search engine optimization, so there are certain technical steps that we can take to improve Googleability of this project. But very often it's also about presenting at conferences, networking, announcing the project on local oral history societies, listservs, archival listservs, and things like that, which we will be doing. It's just we are still finalizing a few things over the summer, and then hopefully we'll be able to do this by the end of the summer. Thank you. And then Oksana Kurelev, if I find it, had a follow-up question. Do we know of other institutions who may have done similar work? For example, life on the prairies through the eyes of children. And I was going to direct it to Elena. Elena, are you still with us? Probably not.
Hardly. Oh. I am opening my files and I need to open the Zoom. So no, I'm not. Sorry.
Okay. That's all right. That's all right. Well, because Elena was leading the project, she would have the best answer. Maria, could you provide some ideas?
No.
If we talk not specifically about children, but generally about oral history on the prairies, of course, there were many different projects, but I think this is one of, if not the largest. It's really a huge, huge amount of data. When we looked for children's specific histories, we couldn't really find a lot. We did find, of course, there's a lot of documentation about residential schools of the time and Indigenous children, but children were not documented. Their life was not as well documented, I guess, as adults, or was not considered as important. Maria, Kathleen Michalchuk is asking, Maria, the illustrations in the book are beautiful, filled with so much detail. More of a comment. Nadia Fotioneshchuk, congratulations to team on exceptional work in processing this project. Once the collection phase has been completed, we had only dreamed that this kind of accessibility to these valuable materials would be possible someday. The work to bring the project to this stage is to be commended. I have two questions. First, are there plans to digitize the project report and to include it somehow on the local culture website? And I'll answer right away. Yes, of course. We will be digitizing. We will try to make available not only audio, but video, those few videos that were created, but also photographs and field notes, although we're not sure that field notes should be in open access. So it would be more for researchers who, like you, Nadia, study research methodology, for example. But absolutely, yes, and the project report, we are distributing it for free anyway, so it just makes sense to have it available online in electronic form. And the second question, could you say a bit more about the exhibit plans? Will it be a traveling exhibit? If so, to where? Yes, it will. We, of course, couldn't plan for this summer because of all the uncertainty. We will be approaching various museums first across the country, as usually we work with different museums in different provinces. And after the museums, we think of having it displayed at festivals, which is usually wears them down pretty significantly. So we want to start with museums. Book looks stunning, lovely project. Looking forward to purchasing. Could you add the link to the childhood exhibit to the chat? Unfortunately, it doesn't exist, as Yelena mentioned, it doesn't exist as an online exhibit yet, because we want to launch it in a physical form and have people see it in person, and then we will work on creating an online version of it. Natalia Helenko-Friesen, I think the title Local Cultures might need some rethinking, expanding. That's an invitation to an exciting conversation. I don't know if we have room and time for it right now, but thank you, Natalia. I don't know if you noticed, but the formal title, original title is Local Culture and Diversity on the Prairies. And because we needed a shorter term, we started using Local Culture Project all the time, but pretty soon we started using local cultures in plural, and for many reasons. And I think we like it that way. But yeah, sure, we are open for discussion. Thank you for your presentation. Looking forward to seeing the exhibit. Thank you. People have to leave. There are many children books dealing with this time period. Absolutely. When I said that we couldn't find a lot of sources, it was more on a research side of things. I didn't mean the children's books that we couldn't find. We couldn't find serious research written about children during that time period, especially about children of non-dominant groups in Canada at the time.
Yeah, and probably children books for children are not about Ukrainian families. At least we didn't find this kind of books, and we were looking for them.
That's right. Larissa Chleden, looking forward to reading the new book and viewing the exhibit. Wonderful way of connecting to the community, right? Andriy Vovchak from Ukraine is asking if this project was presented in Ukraine, has been presented in Ukraine. Ні, Андрію, ще не презентували ми його. Була стаття Наді Фоті. My apologies, I'll say briefly, I'll answer briefly in Ukrainian and then quickly summarize. Надя Фотій-Онещук публікувала статтю, наскільки я пригадую, про цей проект, але то було ще в 2000-х роках, про ранні стадії проекту. Зараз ці 2 роки це було ніби як остання такий спалах, повернення нашої уваги, дуже близької уваги до проекту. So we haven't presented this last phase of the project in Ukraine yet, although we would like to. Although earlier stages of the project were articles about earlier stages were published. At least one I remember by Nadia Fotій-Онещук for sure. Maria?
Yeah, thank you, Marina. I just want to add to Andriy. що матеріали цього проекту використані в публікаціях народознавчих зошитів у 2010 році. Це був спецвипуск про українську фольклористику в Канаді, і матеріали Local Culture Project були використані тоді.
Thank you, Maria. Yeah, in 2010, there was a special issue of the
Folklore notebooks.
Sorry. Yes, Folklore Notebooks journal, professional journal in Ukraine, and it was focused on Ukrainian folkloristics in Canada. And materials of the Local Culture Project were also used in that journal issue. Yeah. All right, thank you very much, everyone, for the questions, for your attendance, for your interest. We look forward to seeing you again. And the reminder that the next Folklore Lunch presentation is next Friday by Larissa Sambulyuk-Chiladin. She's going to be presenting on printers blocks from the oldest Ukrainian newspaper, Ukrainskий Голос, or Ukrainian Voice. Same time, same place. Please register if you haven't already. And next Wednesday, again, during the Kiosk Symposium, we will be talking about Kule Folklore Center projects, including local culture.